my name is Brian Benson with James Bean Estate Sales in Oklahoma City, and today I'm here to talk to you about the 5 most common things that people make mistakes on when they're trying to figure out how much their stuff is worth with an estate. So a lot of times when we go out and look at estates, people will give us their opinion of how much they think their things are worth. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, because obviously we need to be aware of anything that might be potentially valuable, a lot of times they've done research that doesn't really help us, and in fact sometimes can hinder us in selling their items. The first thing I would say is getting the opinion of all your family and friends. And this happens quite a bit. Your family comes in, they look at the stuff, they say, oh, you ought to be able to get at least this much for this, because one time 20 years ago at an antique store they saw in some other country, they saw something similar and it had this price on it. And a lot of times those values are never relevant anymore. If it's in a different city, and if it's not, in this city today, a lot of times these prices are not going to be relevant. Also, a lot of times, you get people who just come up with, these prices out of their head. And what the problem is now we have to prove to you those prices aren't relevant, and it puts a lot more work on us. And to give you an example of that, one time we did a sale, and the realtor told the lady that she thought her Victrola was worth at least $15,000, which was way out of the ballpark. We had to go through the internet and we found all these Victrola books, and we proved that her particular Victrola really only sold at the time for about $600, and no amount of proof that we had that we could give her could convince her that her realtor, who is not an antique dealer, who is just a realtor, wasn't right. So a lot of times it can be counterproductive. So when we did her sale, her Victrola didn't sell, obviously, and then at the end of the sale she was mad because she couldn't get her $15,000 for a Victrola that wasn't, was really realistically only worth about $600. Alright, the next common thing that people do is a lot of times they go out to antique stores and try to figure out, other things that they have that are similar to how much it's worth. And while that's not necessarily a bad idea, it doesn't necessarily always help you out when you look at store merchandise, which might sit on the shelf for 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years, and take years to sell, versus you're looking at your estate sale and we're trying to get everything in your house sold in 2 days. And when you think about it, it's kind of like going to Walmart. Walmart doesn't sell everything that they have, their entire inventory, in 2 days, but at your sale we have to sell everything in 2 days. So because of that, sometimes we have to price things more aggressively to give them the incentive to come in and actually buy your stuff and get it on today. Back when I had my antique store, we usually turned our merchandise every 90 days. If something sat in our store for more than 90 days, unless it was really spectacular, we'd usually take it to an auction and get rid of it. But the store directly next to us, he was very proud of the fact that he had stuff in his inventory that had been there for 20 years, sometimes even 30 years. And he would brag about, oh, I've had this for 30 years. And if you went to his store to get an idea on prices, you wouldn't really have gotten as accurate of a picture on values as if you had gone to our store, where we were able to turn our merchandise more fast, because ours was more what we call currently priced. Now the next 3 things I'm going to talk to you about are all basically on the internet. The first one pops up quite a bit because people will find something on a website called 1stDibs. And 1stDibs, if you're not familiar with it, is a really fun, phenomenal website. And they spend lots of money on advertising, which is why it pops up so often in people's search engines. And basically it is extremely high-end stores all across the country who pay lots of money to advertise their stuff on 1stDibs. And why it's not really relevant is, one, there's no stores in Oklahoma that are on 1stDibs, but it's the very extremely high-end stores from LA, New York, Chicago. They're advertising and they're selling $500,000 light fixtures, or they're selling other high-end stuff. So when they have lower-end items, because of what we call the value perspective, but they're selling to millionaire clients don't think anything's unusual on seeing $2,000 or $3,000 pieces of furniture. Whereas an estate sale, $2,000 or $3,000 on furniture isn't really considered the norm. And particularly in Oklahoma City, at an estate sale where you're trying to liquidate it in 2 days, you can't really value. It's the same thing as going back to the antique stores. You can't really, compare a high-end antique store in LA versus an estate sale in Oklahoma City and think that you're still going to get pretty close to the same prices when it takes them sometimes years to sell these items. And the next thing I want to talk to you about is replacements.com. And it's a website that a lot of people use when they're trying to replace their china or their crystal or sometimes their silver. And a lot of times we will go into estate sales and people will have these big printed lists where they've got their china pulled out, and they're showing me that their china's supposed to be worth $5,000 or $10,000. And I have to sit down and explain to them why their china isn't really worth $5,000 or $10,000, because that's what replacements.com is asking for it. That in reality their china is probably only worth $200 or $300. And people often get confused about this because they're looking at the website and they're seeing these prices. But what you have to understand is replacements deals with millions of different china patterns, hundreds of thousands of crystal and flatware patterns, and when they're selling this stuff, they're selling it to you at a substantial markup because they have tremendous overhead. But also, they know that you're not contacting them to buy an entire set of china. You're replacing just individual pieces. So, these pieces, $40 at a time is not that big of a deal. So what you have to keep in mind when you're looking at these china prices is when you're buying from Replacements Unlimited, you're buying a perfect plate. You're buying a plate that has probably never been eaten off of, that has a perfect gold trim, perfect gold or silver band. There's no wear on the plate, there's no wear on that gold band, there's no knife marks or scratches or anywhere or cracks or chips or anything on this. And a lot of times when you look at older china, you're going to see lots of gold wear because somebody washed it. You're going to see little scratches in the bottom where they use knives or utensils. And those are all things that, first of all, replacements won't buy. So, they also aren't going to, if they don't buy it, they're not going to sell it. So these aren't really comparables. But the other interesting thing is replacements, since they have such tremendous overhead, they can't really afford to pay the prices that people think that they pay when they buy this china. To give you an example, we did an estate sale once where they had some really spectacular china. It was all brand new, really beautiful. I had contacted Replacements because I looked it up on their website. Their website said this china should be worth about $4,000, so I contacted them to see if they would be interested in purchasing it. The lady, who's very sweet, she said when she looked at the china that they could tell that it was a very low demand china. They only had 60 people worldwide who had an interest or had signed up to get on this little list to be able to get notified when they had new pieces, versus Popular Patterns, which had tens of thousands of people who had signed up for updates. Anyway, when I talked to her about the china, she looked through and she says, we're fully stocked on everything on this pattern, so we have no interest in any of the pieces except for the big platter. And I looked on their website, they were asking $300 for their big platter, and she said yes. She said, we do sell that platter for $300, but because this is a low demand pattern, we only pay 5%. And she says, honestly, that would only be $15, and you have to pay it, pay the shipping to get it to us. So she said, you're probably going to pay more to ship it to us, and we're going to send you a check back. And that's kind of what happens with a lot of china. There's such low demand for it, and the prices that they pay for it. If you call them, they're either not going to be interested in it, or they're going to offer you so little it's not even worth shipping it to them. The nice thing about Replacements is anybody can call. You don't have to be a dealer. You can call them up, tell them exactly what you have. They will tell you, they'll look at their list, they'll tell you exactly which pieces they buy. They'll tell you exactly how much they're currently paying for them, so you can see for yourself the actual demand for your particular china. You don't have to go through anybody, you can go directly to them. But that will actually give you a much more realistic value of how much your china might be worth. The next thing you can do, if you're trying to find out what your china or crystal is worth, you can also use eBay. And that would be the last thing we want to talk to you about as far as ways that people make mistakes. Is you have to, if you use eBay, you have to use eBay correctly. And when I talk about using eBay correctly, that is, the mistake that people make is they will go to eBay and they'll type stuff in on their search bar. And when they search it in, like let's say they're looking for a Hummel, they'll type it in and they'll find their exact Hummel, and then they'll see people who might be asking $1,000 for this particular Hummel, or maybe $500 for it. And then as you scroll down, you'll see people asking $30 for the same Hummel. And they think that just because people are asking $500 or $1,000, that their item must also be worth $500 or $1,000. And what you have to keep in mind is eBay is made up of millions of sellers who all have their merchandise on eBay. So they all have a different perspective of how much they think their stuff is worth. And a lot of these people list stuff on eBay. Their items will never sell. They might sit on eBay for years and never get a buyer for it. And so to really look at eBay and how you find prices off of eBay is you can't just type in the search bar and just hit search. You have to go down on the left side of the page. You go down towards the bottom and there will be two little boxes. One will say completed items and one will say sold items. And you have to hit the sold item tab because the sold item is actually the stuff that's actually sold. And that filters out all the stuff, all the crazy asking prices that people have been asking. And then you can actually see the actual comparables for things that have sold. Once you look through that, what you want to do is, what we typically do is we will hit, highest to lowest, which is the tab up at the top. You hit highest to lowest, and you usually ignore the top value, you usually ignore the bottom value, but when we go through, we start looking for items that have had more than one bid. And the reason we do this is the way eBay's set up is you can either, some sellers can opt to sell an item immediately, or they can, put it in an auction where people bid competitively on that item. If they have it for sale immediately, these items also might be on the market for, 10, 15 years before they actually ever get sold. Basically they're just waiting for one person one time to come through to bid on it or to buy it versus having competitive bidding on it. So what will happen is if you're looking through, you might see something that's priced high, but you don't know how long it's been sitting on eBay for them to have gotten that money. Your best option when you're really trying to find the market value is you want to scroll down to where you see the competitive bidding, where you start seeing 4 or 5 people, fighting for this item, and you want to see what it ends up. That's usually going to give you the best idea of what the actual market value is. So when people ask me, how do we get our prices? What I usually tell them is, first of all, I'm very fortunate in that we've done lots of sales. We've done over 1,000 sales in 20 years, and that has given me the advantage of, after the sales are over, I can kind of look through the house and see what didn't sell. And if I start noticing that certain things aren't selling anymore, I start really looking at, well, why did this not sell? Was it broken? Was it damaged? Is it out of style? What is it? And when we start noticing that things don't sell as well, such as back when we used to sell VCRs, and VCRs used to be $100, and then they quit bringing $100, and then we started marking them lower. You start learning that you price your stuff according to how well people will buy it. We don't price it based off of some crazy expectations. We basically, everything we price it based off of how well we think that somebody, or how much we think somebody will actually pay for it. This is based off of our experience of seeing these similar items sell. And as we notice that things get more popular, we start pricing them up a little bit. When they get less popular, we price them down, and it's really simple. Other thing we do use is we do use eBay, and a lot of times people make fun of that, but that really is that's the most popular source for people finding values when we're doing estate sales. When we price something, often people are sitting there on their phones, they're looking it up on eBay, so we have to be competitive with, if they're going to buy something, we can't be priced higher than what they can get it for on eBay. Sometimes we do use replacements, but we use it in the way that I specify, where I directly call them and find out what their interest is, and they tell us what their interest is. This is a good way of finding out whether your china is even sellable at all, or whether we can price it, whether it's basically just a set of china, or whether it's actually a fine collectible. That probably covers, I'd say, 99% of everything that we price. There's a few, oddball things, like if we get jewelry, obviously we have to go to a jewelry appraiser. If we have art, we have special art websites that we are members of that we can go through and appraise stuff. But that kind of gives you the idea of, this is how we come up with the prices. For you to come up with a price, like I said, if you don't want to pay anybody, eBay is a good option, but you have to use the source correctly. Replacements is a good option, but you have to be able to use it correctly. What you don't want to do is use it incorrectly, have too high of expectations, and then, which is just going to set you up for disappointment. That wraps up our video for today. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call at 405-528-0127, or visit us online at jamesbeanestatesales.com. And remember, we're in Oklahoma City, so we might not be able to help you out in your area, but I'm always open to answering questions.